Right, it's your Geordie Journos. We thought we had to do a video after what we've just watched. We've just all been to the pub, haven't we?
Yes.
And watched Manchester United lift the FA Cup. Been an awful manager for Manchester United, Erik ten Hag, but he's managed to win the Carabao Cup after beating Newcastle United and also beating Newcastle United in the FA Cup final this weekend as well.
May as well be Newcastle
Certainly
United.
feels like Manchester City put in a real Newcastle United Wembley performance this afternoon.
They were victims of the Newcastle United Wembley curse today, Man City. Like you could tell, the best team in the world just didn't turn up.
This is the biggest Sunderland Trophy celebration since 1973.
Johnny Evans getting on was massive.
Amad Diallo's FA Cup winners medal. Wow, unbelievable. Anyway, we joke, we laugh. It's no joking matter, no laughing matter. You might hear planes flying over there. That's quite loud.
We won't be on a plane next season.
No,
Come on, that's a segue for you.
No, we're just trying to weigh this up. These two guys are going to Japan. I don't know if I'm going to come.
You've got to know.
I know you think I should. I don't know. Should we? Let the viewers decide. Do you think we should? Do you think?
Let the viewers decide.
I can't decide.
Put a poll out.
I'll tell you what. Upset Newcastle fans will not
be watching this.
Will not be happy
what are
with
you
this.
doing?
2 minutes in, where we're laughing and joking.
No. There's a plane flying over. We're not on a plane next season. Newcastle aren't in Europe, despite finishing 7th. Only the second time in the past decade a Premier League side finishing in the top 7 has not qualified for Europe. And the last time it happened was because 8th place won the FA Cup, and it's happened again this season with Manchester United doing it. And Manchester United, for all we can point and laugh at them and celebrate finishing above them,
They had the last laugh in the end, didn't they? They did.
The winners,
they did what matters.
Football club, even their lowest moments in the Premier League still turn into successful seasons.
Worst 2 seasons they've probably had in terms of performance, consistently, and they've won 2 trophies. It's just the life cycle of football, where we are, where we stand at the moment. It's disappointment. I think, realistically, when I look at where Newcastle United finished this season, if you'd offered us that at the start of the season, I may have reluctantly accepted it. It wouldn't have been a definite accept, but I would have thought 7th place get Europe, like you say, 9 times out of 10 or 8 times out of 10, whatever it may be, gets you European places. I would have probably rolled the dice on 7th because I did think they'd have their struggles this season. But it's turned what could have been, I think, in many ways they've scraped through. That's what it would have been if they got into Europe. Have they deserved to finish? Did they deserve European football? I think there's been moments, yes. I would ultimately say, as it's ended up, no, they haven't. To be relying on other teams to do favours at the end of the season was always going to be risky, and it's proved that it hasn't worked for them. I think it isn't. It's a funny one. It's one of the hardest ones I've probably ever had to assess. It hasn't been a disappointment. So you only have to take recent context, and I hate doing this, and I hate looking back and saying, "Ooh, well, this is where you could have been." But realistically, Newcastle United, you're the stat man, Dom. I don't have these stats, but I'm just going to run off the top of my head.
You like putting pressure on me.
I know I do, but I'm probably going to say something like, I would say a 7th place finish. Newcastle have probably only done that. I mean, really, the top 7 in the Premier League have probably only done that 2 or 3 times in the last 15 years. It hasn't been anything. There's been nothing to write home about. So if you take historical context into things, 7th place is
20 years since they achieved back-to-back top 10 finishes.
Has it? Yeah. So
where they came, 3rd, and then they came 5th the season after, and there was a bit of a upset that Newcastle missed out of the Champions League. And this has a similar feeling, maybe, where Newcastle have missed out of European football altogether, but ultimately 7th place in the Premier League. At the start of the season, we would have said that's almost a banker for European football because of the extra Champions League potential as well, which again falls back to Newcastle as well. Underperforming English teams in European competitions this season has cost an extra European place. At one stage it looked like it could be 8 teams in Europe. Eventually it's going to the likes of Italy and Germany. So Newcastle in a lot of ways only have themselves to blame, but then in a lot of ways for not getting Conference League football, they've been very unlucky at the same time.
They have. I think what I was going to get on and saying was no European football. 7th place is a poor score. I think most people would have said that's a decent finish. It's not a bad finish, but to not have European football as the flourish on the end of that is a real disappointment. I think anybody who tries to paint it up with any kind of ooh, but that's the end of Paul Dummett and that's the end of Matt Ritchie, or yeah, but Thursdays would ruin any chances next season. I genuinely think, like, I'm not going to be someone who stands here and says, I see that as any kind of success. As another flight, this is
mocking us.
They're rubbing in this in, aren't they? If you can hear these flights, there's literally planes flying overhead. You'll probably try to guess the geography of where we are. You'll just think it's some random housing estate, but we're next to a pub in a flight path. Could be most of Tyneside, that
could be anyway.
Yeah, so I think a poor score will be 7th. I think no European football is actually a disappointment. I think everybody at the football club and everybody associated with the football club will think European football was a must again this season, by hook or by crook. And they allowed things to slip out of their own hands, and the day they did it was Brighton. And I think if we go back to the Geordie Journos videos that we did that day, Newcastle United had to beat Brighton. If they hadn't beat Brighton, they were struggling, because it was always going to be tough to go and win at Old Trafford. You can go to Old Trafford and get a point. The points difference was 3 points. It shows they would have had to beat Brighton and get a point at Old Trafford. They had to do both. But it was always going to be tough going there. They had to make sure they did their business at home, and they failed. Yes, you can go back, but seasons have ebbs and flows. You can go back to Everton, you can go back to Luton, you can go back to whenever it may be, but they went and got something against West Ham where with 10 minutes to go it didn't look like they were going to get anything. So seasons ebb and flow, and I think Newcastle were presented with a position with 3 games left of the Premier League season to say you probably have to you definitely have to win 3 to put yourself in the lottery. Win 1, get 3 points to put yourself in the lottery, but you probably have to do a little bit more, and it was in their hands. It was in their hands to do, and they were unable to do it. So for all of the problems and issues and injuries and complications in European football and Wednesday nights to Saturday nights and squad rotation, it actually came down to a 3-game shootout, and they weren't good enough in it.
Yeah,
they would have needed 7 points from the last 9, which is a big ask.
Chelsea showed up, didn't they?
But Chelsea were just in incredible form towards the back end of the season, top 4 form, and they ended up coming from, I think, bottom half at one point, certainly around that 10th, 11th spot with 10 games to go, finishing 6th, and fair play to them. They're the Conference League team now, which 6th place Conference League doesn't quite seem right really, but it's the way it is, where you've got a team not finishing in the European places and winning the FA Cup.
I think failure is such a strong word, but it does feel, and I wish I could find a different word here in my vocabulary to describe Newcastle's season, but the fact that they've missed out on Europe today, it does feel like it's a little bit like that, because of they put themselves back in the running, and during that final course of the season, from that March international break, they put themselves in a position where they probably should have done it. But then you look back, and this is all if buts and maybes, but then you look back further beyond that as well. The points they've dropped at home: Nottingham Forest losing at home, Luton Town drawn at home, Everton draw at home, even getting beat off Luton away. There's been results in there where it feels like if the points had just went Newcastle's way, they would have been there. And I suppose maybe that's one thing you may take as a positive, is the fact that even in a season where it's been so chaotic and it's had so many lows, highs as well, but they haven't been that far away. So to try and spread some positivity, maybe that is the positive for next year, is the fact that even during a difficult season they weren't that far away. So I think lessons will be learned from this season, and yeah, it's a disappointment to lose out on Europe, but it's a learning curve for everyone involved, and I do think it can be there is positives to take, but having seen that as well, the positives to take are, and I swore I wasn't going to do this, I'm going to go there now. You put us on the spot because you don't like it, but I think, to be fair, it works in many ways. So Newcastle now don't have the pressure of European football next season. Did I want the pressure of European football? Of course I do, because as to be a successful club consistently, you have to be qualifying for every season. But almost allows Newcastle United to reset a little bit, and maybe puts a pressure on Eddie Howe a little bit here, as the fact that they haven't got games next season. They haven't got the extra games next season. Can they go and push for that top 4 again? And I do think, and I'm not necessarily one of them, but I do think some of you guys watching now will maybe expect or hope for Champions League football next year, because you'd seen what Eddie Howe can do with a team when they don't have the extra games, because you have that element of rest. The high pressure, high intensity football will be, you'll be able to do it more often, and maybe that will benefit Newcastle. But I don't want to say that as a silver line. You asked us for a positive, I'm trying to give you one.
Yeah.
But me personally, I don't see it as a silver line because I want to see Newcastle in Europe. I want to see them in Europe every single season. It hasn't quite happened, but look, it is what it is, and I think now we can't dwell on it. We just have to move on, and the only thing Newcastle can do now is have a positive summer, a positive next season, and in 12 months' time, hopefully we are back in Europe, and hopefully that sort of the Champions League place as well. Which, as I say, I do think there'll be supporters out there hoping that Champions League football will return because they haven't got those extra games.
Puts a lot of pressure on next season though, like a lot of pressure on Eddie Howe and his players, because I think a lot of people, I think we would all accept, I'm sure West Ham certainly did, maybe finishing outside the European places if you win the Conference League, which was a competition Newcastle had a good chance of winning if they were in it, and you qualify for Europe through that anyway. The Premier League almost becomes secondary because you've won a trophy, and Manchester United will be feeling the same way today. And I think this whole, if you want to be an elite club and progress, and if Eddie Howe as a manager wants to progress, managing those 3 game weeks, playing midweek every other week or things like that, you need to get used to that. You need to get into that groove, and we've spoken about that before, how West Ham, by playing in Europe consistent seasons, have found a sort of groove and can just get into the latter stages of European competitions and still remain somewhat competitive in the Premier League, and then the teams further up from that do the same, with the exception of, I suppose, Manchester United in Europe.
You make an interesting point. Like, it does, in many ways, it puts a lot of extra pressure on every single cup game next season, in my opinion. That's not saying a pressure on the manager, it's just a pressure on judging fundamentals, like success, like how far you're progressing, how you're moving forward. Next season, every single cup game they've got to win. It doesn't come from this is a shot. We're now in one less competition. Arguably, we were looking at being in one that was very winnable. I mean, Newcastle don't win trophies.
They'd head into it
but
probably in the top 3 favourites to win, which in no other competition they would be top 3 favourites unless they were in the semi-finals.
Chelsea going into that competition, you're looking at potentially, I know people talk about Napoli, you're looking at, it's probably Torino that are the favourites to take that place from Italy. So, you're talking, I mean, Copenhagen would be another one that might potentially be in there. But these are the type of teams that you're talking about saying they'll win that competition next season. It's not elite. It's not European elite, but it's a gateway. It's a gateway competition. Like West Ham found that they got themselves into the Europa League. They succeeded again in that competition, having done well previously the year before that. It's all about progression. I think this is a minor step backwards for Newcastle United, having taken a major step forward a season previous. They probably stepped too far going into the Champions League in some ways, but then they've come back a level, because I think at this point in the progression or the graph of where you'd expect the club to be after takeover, not being in European competition, their 4th season after takeover.
3.5.
So 3.5, but the third full season not being in European competition, I don't think would have been in anybody's playbook.
No.
So I think it's a genuine disappointment. But look, they're going to have to go again. I think that the pressure, the next step for this football club, having done Europe, would have been getting in Europe again. But I think it's very much now is can you get your hands on some silverware? That's not easy. There's only 3 clubs can possibly do it now in the competitions that Newcastle United are in. So, and they haven't done it domestically. We're not talking about European competitions. They haven't done it domestically since 1955. So it's not going to be easy. They have now, in the last 2 seasons, shown a level of consistency where they've shown they can get to the later stages of competitions. Throughout the last 4, the 2 FA Cup competitions and the 2 Carabao Cup competitions, they've gotten to quarter-finals at least in 3 of those 4 campaigns. They have to make sure that they do the same again and more. I think we need something to show for this campaign. Of course, the silver lining could be that, like you say, there is merit in that argument. There's merit in that argument that these daft Thursday nights in Bosnia might have had a negative impact on what happens in the Premier League, and it is still a big ask, and that's why it can't be understated what West Ham actually went and did 2 years ago. Aston Villa couldn't do it with a much better team. Tottenham with a much better team couldn't do it. It isn't an easy competition, even though on paper it's the easiest of all of the competitions Newcastle United would have a chance of entering. So I think there is pressure now. I think they need to make sure that next season's got to be the silverware year, and that's the biggest challenge that anybody's going to face at St James's Park as a manager and as a player, is can you ensure silverware comes back to the ground, because it's proven impossible for countless managers and even more players since 1955, when Newcastle United were actually one of the most successful clubs in English football. They've not been anywhere since everybody overtook them in the 70s and 80s, that they're nowhere near now. And they need to make that's the biggest hurdle they'd ever overcome at this football club, and it always was going to be after the takeover, was that first piece of silverware. When the first one comes, I've no doubt plenty more will follow. That breaking that down, that first barrier, is always going to be the hardest one they'll ever have to do.
And I think the Conference League was that gateway
That was the game,
trophy.
yeah.
That's why
the
the frustration is there. I think when we spoke, what would Newcastle's first trophy potentially be after the takeover, we probably all agreed if it is going to happen, it would probably be the Conference League.
Yeah, we did
maybe a Carabao
it,
Cup, and they did come very close to winning that as well. But I say it as
because
well.
the FA Cup's a tough game to win. 2 years in a row, it's been Manchester United against Manchester City, one trophy apiece. It shows it's not an easy competition to win. Premier League's Manchester City. It's not. It doesn't come easy. Those are the two competitions that are the hardest. Your Carabao Cup is one that some people, because it comes so early in the season, don't always take amazingly heavily. Most of the teams who would normally look to win it and are capable of winning it are still in European competitions at that stage, even when the final comes along, so it becomes a secondary to many of those teams. It's not going to be for Newcastle United. The Carabao Cup has to be the one. That's such pressure that we can't skirt around that. It feels negative saying it, but if progress is to be achieved here, what is progress at Newcastle United? It's a question every single one of you guys out there and everybody, we all have to ask ourselves, what is progress? Would progress simply be finishing in the top 4 again next season? Yes, there's an element of progress to that, but if you don't do that, then it's got to be silverware.
Yeah. It's just the reality of Newcastle and who they're owned by now and the ambitions behind the scenes. Newcastle aren't a club that are owned by Mike Ashley anymore. The ambitions have changed, and ultimately success has to follow it at some point. And I think this season can be accepted, if that's the right word, if the lessons are learned and Newcastle come back stronger next season. I think that's the only thing I can say on what's happened today. Is it's all about how Newcastle respond. And if they have a similar season like they have this season to last, and they end up finishing 7th for next year, that's not a good season. They need to be pushing those higher European places, in my opinion, and certainly challenging from a trophy, because again, even in a season where they've had so many games, they've got a quarter-finals of an FA Cup, they've got a quarter-finals of a Carabao Cup. Before that, they got a final of a Carabao Cup. They need to do the same again, in my opinion, because I say success needs to follow quite soon, and that's just the harsh reality of who the ambitions of the owners now. That's
the hardest bit for me, is that if you put it down on paper and you look at historical context, it feels like a successful season. That you couldn't really argue that the 7th place finish, 2 quarter-finals and a champion. Yes, well above average. There probably has only been and that's the biggest frustration about the season for me, is it's been one of nearly performances.
Yeah.
Newcastle United have only ever got to the last 16 of the Champions League, Europe's premier competition, in their whole history once before.
Yeah.
They were within touching distance of doing that. Newcastle United, it could have almost been, European-wise, barring winning a trophy, been the most successful season that they've ever achieved. But it doesn't feel. I don't come out of this season with an amazing amount of feeling that, wow, well done, lads. We've been fun. This has been brilliant. It actually feels the other way. It feels like this could have been so much better.
That's it. That's what it is. It's been a season of near misses, and even Newcastle not involved today. It went down to the final moments when Jeremy Doku scores with 3 minutes of normal time to go.
They were never coming back.
We thought, it's over, and then it just goes. We'll have to pay attention now.
When you at the minute, we're seeing all those pictures come through on the early hours of Tuesday morning on Getty and things like that, where it was like, his eyes look a bit blurry. It wasn't. I never had a great feel about it, but you still feel quality would shine through. And fair play to Man United, honestly, they put in a performance for the ages. I thought Raphael Varane Like that was like rolling back the years to his Real Madrid days. He was outstanding, and maybe that's why Manchester United have struggled so much, because we talk so much about Newcastle United injuries, but they've never been able consistently to call upon the base of that team in Varane with all of his experience, and Lisandro Martinez, who's a top performer at any level, international and in the Premier League. They've never been able to call upon that, so everybody's had their injuries. Newcastle more so than others, but it's just a one of nearly. We nearly got there. We had a chance to do it, and ultimately fluffed our lines whenever any pressure was put on ourselves, whether that was in the league, whether that was in the Carabao Cup, which took the lightest of pressures, for that to turn around, and then the FA Cup, where it was a non-event really. Newcastle United going to Manchester City was a surrender. So any light pressure that the team have had, I think that's one thing that I would hope they'll take from this season. Isn't the lessons of how you do this, how you do that. It's how do you become a more robust version of Newcastle United? How do you stand up to the pressures and the rigours of dealing with big high pressure games against high pressure opposition? Because in the league, at home, fantastic, they've done that. Can they do it away from home? They haven't stood up to the pressures. We went to Arsenal, we were all there, and that was one of that was a surrender of any era. That was a performance, the type that was put in, that could have been under Graham Souness. It could have been under Alan Pardew. It could have been under John Carver. It wasn't.
Steve Bruce.
Yeah, it wasn't what you expect of a team fighting at the top end of the division. How does Newcastle United beat that? How do we become more robust? Because the minute you become more robust in those away day performances against the big teams, they've went to Chelsea and lost twice. If they'd won one of those games there, they would have made the Carabao Cup semi-final, or they probably would have finished sixth in the league. They lost both of those games. Pressure situations, they didn't have the minerals to go there and get a result. How do they change that? That's the biggest thing for me, is how do you become something more?
It's almost like they found that in the season they finished the Champions League, though, because they went to teams like Arsenal in a game like you just referenced there, and they drew 0-0 that day.
Did I?
And it was that famous word, Eddie Howe's something, Mags.
They did it at Man United. They drew Man United when it was a nip and tuck game, and they went there and drew Man United, finished third that season.
So the nastiness has disappeared slightly.
Has it been a mentality thing this season?
He hinted at that.
He did.
And
he put it down to personnel.
It's not that.
That's what he said.
It's not that. It isn't that. I don't want to pay. I think Joe Linton's a fantastic performer. I thought he was great on the final day. Showed how much Newcastle had missed him, but he's not the reason why Newcastle didn't finish where they did. Nor is it, Sven Botman's injury. Nor is it. It's none of them. It's probably a collective. I don't think this team. I've said it before, and I could be the most wrong of wrong, but I go back to that day where they had it in their grasp in December, around mid-December, at St James's Park, and they were there. They had AC Milan in their hands.
Battering them, weren't they?
I genuinely look back at that game and think, was that the day Newcastle United's hearts broke? I don't know if we ever really were the same again. And injuries...
Not until the March International.
We recovered after March.
We did, but injuries matter. But I know what a lot of the damage was done. And a lot of it was injury related, a lot of it was selection related, a lot was, did Howe always get things right? I don't think he did. I think he'll reflect on that himself. Yeah. There's changes he could have made. I think there's reasons why he didn't change players at PSG, and didn't change players at Chelsea, and you just look at that 8-0 ridiculous farce that we've seen down 11,000 miles away across the world, which we haven't referenced. But there's reasons why he didn't call on some of those players. It's because they're absolutely nowhere near. And that's still the hangover and the remnants of the Mike Ashley era at Newcastle United. It's that 8-0 defeat to me was very much a sign that this club still is not out of the hangover in every way, shape and form. That the academy was and players were just forgotten about. It wasn't a thing. It didn't matter, because it didn't make any difference to Sports Direct's profit margins. It had no bearing on it at all. So I still think that 8-0, I still point, and it might sound silly, but it's still a very faint hangover of the rubbish that was served up during them 15 years, and why Newcastle United why we're now grasping at things and saying, we really, if we're a progressive football club, I think in many ways we should be looking at it and going, look, this season was a failure. A team doesn't finish in the Champions League and not get in Europe next year. Doesn't happen, or rarely happens, or shouldn't happen. Liverpool did it, but it shouldn't happen to football clubs. I don't think anybody at Liverpool would have been standing there thinking it was a success that they didn't get into Europe. It didn't get into the Champions League, sorry. They dropped down a level. I think you've got to look at it and say it was a failure, but this club isn't at the level of the top, as they call the big six, which I hate. I always have hated. It's the financial six. It's the big money six, if you want. But Newcastle aren't at that level because of 15 years of stagnation under Mike Ashley. I'm not going to sit here and say we didn't get into Europe because of Mike Ashley, but there are still sort of trends that go through this club where they still aren't unable to shake away that feeling of the previous regime.
Just talking about the big six, I think 7th place you were talking about is par score. It's where Newcastle should finish, if you know what I mean. Yeah. They have the 7th highest revenue in the Premier League. Obviously they've had a very high net spend over the past few years, but 7th place is there or thereabouts. If you're saying predict the Premier League next season, you probably have Newcastle in and around 7th.
Yeah.
Maybe not us, the average football fan probably would. But do you think, like, now, no Europe next season, I think a lot of people will be maybe a bit fearful. What knock-on impact does that have on the transfer window this summer, if any?
I just think it changes the feel of the football club ending the summer. I think that'll impact transfers too much. I don't think it will.
They'll spend what they've got, won't they? They'll spend at the max they can possibly spend here, and I think they'll have to budget for that. And the budgeting, look, I talk about the farce on the other end of the world. It wasn't a farce in terms of financial stance, because they made as much money from that farce as what they would from getting probably to the quarterfinals and semi-finals of the Conference League. It was actually a financial.
Conference League isn't anywhere near as transformative as the Champions League. Newcastle made 18 million from the Champions League. They'd have to win the Conference League next season and wouldn't even get three-quarters of that.
So the Australia trip, though, they got more from that than they would if they got the latter stages of the Conference League. Is that right?
Yeah.
Which is
so it made sense financially, and it made sense in a lot of ways. And this is what I'm saying. I don't think not being in Europe and the Conference League changes budgets. I don't really think it makes a difference. It probably changes a perception. I think footballers coming to football clubs quite like the idea that it'd be nice to play in Europe. And they haven't got that. Players who deserve to be in Europe, you mentioned it when we're sitting in the pub watching the game, Alexander Isak is a footballer who deserves to be playing in Europe. It was you. Sorry. It was you. Well, Bruno Guimaraes is a footballer who deserves to play in Europe. There's probably 5 or 6 others.
Paul Dummett. Couldn't Eddie Howe. You're not happy.
Kill that. He's killed. Tommy's killed that. Tom's killed that with his Paul Dummett.
Maybe. He's played before. I mean,
well,
it's possible.
Sorry.
We've got to bring
We've
got to bring a little bit of humour to the video. We're all disappointed, really. But yeah.
To be fair, on Matt Ritchie and Paul Dummett, I think reading in between the lines of Eddie Howe's reading Eddie Howe's comments, it doesn't sound like they're going to get new deals.
I still think he'll try his best.
But
I genuinely think he'll try his best to give them deals.
He was pretty adamant that their future would be dependent on European football. He made that clear. He made that clear at Brentford on the final day, and he made that clear in Australia.
You don't need them. You don't need to have a ridiculously inflated squad if you're not going to have Thursday night football. And you don't need players who aren't going to play games of football anyway. So whether you play Thursday or Saturday, it doesn't make any difference to me. You shouldn't have Paul Dummett and Matt Ritchie in a Premier League upwardly mobile, aspiring football club. I just think it's ridiculous. And it's nothing personal, because I think they've been both great servants. Matt Ritchie with Dwight Gale was one of the major reasons why Newcastle United got out of the division below. Like, he's got hero status in many ways for the performances he put in that year. He was absolutely incredible, and then he carried it on at the Premier League, where we weren't sure, can those players make the step up? Dwight Gale couldn't. He couldn't make that step up. Matt Ritchie did. Matt Ritchie's been an incredible footballer for Newcastle United, so don't ever think when I sort of say things like this that it's any slight on what I think. Paul Dummett, I always thought he was a starting centre-half, but you're going back 10 years. You're probably going back 10 years where you think Paul Dummett should have been a starting player for Newcastle United. Clubs move, times move, football moves, and if Newcastle United don't move, they're going to stand still, and they're going to go backwards. So it's the end. It has to be the end for footballers who don't play games at a football club. It has to be the end for footballers who realistically, who signs Paul Dummett and Matt Ritchie if they leave Newcastle. And I'd actually use you as a sure on this, because obviously you guys have that relationship anyhow. I'm not so sure. I'd still be surprised if he doesn't try his best to make sure those lads get contracts at Newcastle United. It wouldn't be the biggest surprise to me if
I
Paul
think not
Dummett...
playing them in Australia is a big...
Do you think it's a big hint?
That's
Yeah.
a big hint. And based
Said
on
it
what he
himself.
said twice, if he's playing the kids who some of them are out of contract, he's not playing Matt Ritchie and Paul Dummett almost just in case they get injured, because then who takes them if they...
But
do
who
an
takes
injury?
them anyway?
Well, you're looking outside
That's
of
where I
the
was
Premier
going.
League.
It's yeah. And it's probably pedigree that gets them the game time, if anybody, quite high up in the Championship, because I don't think those players are at a level...
They'd be squad players.
They'd be squad players, a decent Championship team. And I think their level is probably close at the bottom end, if not League One, in certain respects. I think they're a long way off the ability you required. And not a team that finishes 7th in the Premier League and wants to finish higher. We're not talking about a team that's finished 7th and fluked it. Wolves, Everton. We're not talking about a team who's got there and thinks, wow, this is the greatest thing on the planet. We're talking about a team who's got there and thinks, nah, that's not quite good enough. And good, so we all should. I'm glad everybody's looking in the mirror now, probably if you are, and saying, that's not quite right. That's, it's okay, but it's not good enough. We want better, and we should get better. And I think we will get better. I think they would have still got better even if they'd finished in the Conference League as well.
Yeah.
But such is life. You can't rely on everybody to do favours for you. You've got to do your own business. And ultimately, Newcastle United did not do enough to finish in Europe this season.
Can't argue with that.
No.
Nothing. Ended then. Anything else? I'm glad I got you on a tangent about Matt Ritchie and Paul Dummett, because I initially thought you were going to knock us out.
He's rattling off his great point.
I
And then
know,
you
it's
just go,
like,
Paul
Paul
Dummett.
Dummett.
Paul Dummett. No, I was just... You threw us with Paul Dummett because I just...
That's a good,
It is a great point. It is a great point. But they've been good servants, and like I say, I hope I've waxed lyrical enough about Matt Ritchie. The place he holds in my heart and what he's done for this football club is up there. Seriously, like him and Dwight Gale that season. Like I was on the tools like you guys. I was covering Newcastle United week in week out in the Championship that year. I was there the day that you were there as well.
Yeah, I was there. Yeah,
We're there
was
like the day when Newcastle United won that out of nowhere. Jack Grealish could have done me a favour that day if he'd come off the bench, you never know. But that day, and Matt Ritchie was a huge part of that, and he has been a huge part since, behind the scenes as well, according to Eddie Howe. But football clubs move, and moving forwards does not really require a lot of looking backwards. You look backwards too much, that's where you'll end up.
I think to sum up the day, you would have took it absolutely, but it never feels right cheering goals that another team score.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And good teams looking to be at the top, ultimately don't
Do their own
do
business.
that. They do it themselves. And yeah,
Man City on sitting here now worried because they've dropped out of Europe because they did their business.
I would have
This
felt-
was a flourish
yeah.
for them. For us, it was always grasping, like
Yeah.
come a grip with our fingertips on this European place. And yeah, I would ultimately, if I summed it up, I'm probably going off again. But I would say, I don't think they did deserved it really. I never felt it. I think early part of the season, I thought it was nailed on. I thought they'll definitely finish in Europe again. I thought there was no doubt. And it made us believe again for the last maybe month of the season. I think this is possible. I think we did a video, and I can't remember what game it was, stuffed somebody at home, and it was, I think I'd said it on the video. I said, weirdly, I'd written this off. And today was the first day I believed, again, that this would happen. So there was a long period, I would say, from December through till probably March, April, where I actually had written it off. I didn't think this team was good enough this season to finish in European places.
It was the West Ham game, wasn't it?
Was it?
Because an hour of that West Ham game, Newcastle 3-1 down.
Yeah.
That's your season is literally done.
Yeah.
And then they found a way to claw back, and then they gave that hope at the end of the season, and they couldn't quite get over the line in the end. I do agree. I think if you look at the season overall, points that they've dropped, don't get us wrong, they've faced some very difficult situations, mitigating circumstances, but the harsh reality is they probably didn't do enough to deserve it, because it was in their own hands many times, and they let go of it, shall we say.
I'd say they probably did do enough to deserve you, because coming 7th historically gets you
It
Europe.
does, aye.
And you have to
Well, yeah.
remember, we our sort of mindset of Europe is Europa League or Champions League.
It is.
Conference League is a tertiary competition, let's not forget, and they deserved to be in a tertiary competition, probably based on their league position, if you like. So,
but you
it's
meant
not
to win.
like
You meant to win the Carabao Cup. They're getting it though, and they got they surrendered with that Kieran Trippier error. Let's be brutally honest about it. They surrendered that game. I actually thought they surrendered it with about half an hour to go. And I think that's one of the games Howe might look back upon in history and go, "Did I do right by my team that day?" I think
that was
one
when Anthony Gordon was like a dead man walking, wasn't he? He was just
him and
knackered.
was it him and Almiron literally couldn't run at the end.
It was just like
bizarre.
Lewis Hall was just sat on the bench twiddling his thumbs because he was
Go
allowed
on, son.
allowed
Give
to
us
go
10
on the
minutes.
bench,
Run about. It was one of those where we all said it, and I think we all said it at PSG as well. I think, like I said, going back to the 8-0 rubbish that was served up on Friday morning, I think you can see why he didn't turn to some of those players. You can see why there was a couple of them on the bench that day. You can see why he didn't go near them, because he probably knows that's nowhere near good enough. But that's probably an argument for another day.
Yeah, we need to start saving content ideas for the summer. So
What do you want me to talk about? I'm really interested to hear what you guys saw. These two, interested to know. These two will definitely be in Tokyo. I don't know. We haven't decided on me yet. Have we?
We'll let
The viewers decide.
Send Liam to Tokyo, yes or no? We'll put a
Yes or
poll
no?
on.
Shall I put a poll in the community group? Watch out for the poll.
Because everyone will say yes and you go, oh,
Have you
well,
checked?
I don't know.
Have you checked when anybody said?
I don't know.
'Cause I did put that poll out.
You keep talking.
Yeah, so I'll be interested to know what you guys want from our content this summer. We're going to try and get together as much as we possibly can, as well as doing my day jobs for the Shield Gazette and Newcastle World. Yeah, so it's mixed. I would say there's 43%. My question was, no Europe for Newcastle United, but a 7th-place finish. Has the season been a success or a failure? Success 43%, failure 57%. So that's really interesting. Like, if you haven't got
It's only
involved,
been on an hour, by the way.
it has. If you haven't got involved in the community post, let me know in the comments on here. Do you think Newcastle United season has been a success or a failure? All three of us will endeavour to answer your questions or any points that you make. But yeah, let me know as well what content you want to see from us this season. Do you want your transfer shows? Do you want us commenting on every coffin split out, which would be tough for to do? We can't always do that. But do you want to have these more analytical, hour-long, 45-minute-long, whatever they may be, or the quick 30 minutes that you'll see today?
quick.
We'll be pushing forward.
Quick 30 minutes. We tried.
We're not going to do a long video today. We've done that twice now this week.
We tried.
But just on that poll, you could cut this if you want, but if gun to your head, what would you say? Success or failure this season?
It's a very straight question. I'll say failure.
I think the answer in reality is somewhere in between, but it is failure. At the start of the season,
Correct.
Europe is the minimum target. Conference League is the minimum
have to get Europe
successful
again.
season, and they didn't do it ultimately. It's mitigating factors. They've been very unlucky not to do it.
And 7th isn't a failure.
Yeah.
But it is.
In terms of targets and aspirations and what was expected at the start of the season for a Champions League side who finished 4th last season, 7th with no Europe is a failure. A very harsh failure, but still a failure.
There won't be many Champions League teams of last season not getting to Europe this season.
Well, the example we looked at was Lens, French League. Lens.
Are they not going to be?
Yes.
Are they going to? Because they're going to their Conference League.
Yeah, they finished 7th.
They did what we did. And Villa have done a reverse Newcastle, but then they got Conference League last season.
Of course they did. Yeah, 8th place, was it?
7th.
7th.
It is.
They've been unlucky.
It's a harsh reality because 7th, as we've said at the start, usually gets European football, but
only top 5 guarantees. And if you don't finish in the top 5, you're in the lap of the gods.
That's the doing your job.
You're in the lap of the gods. If you don't finish they finished 4th last year. If you don't finish in the top 5 this year, you're in the lap of the gods. You're relying on others,
Yes,
and
right.
that's ultimately where they've been.
yeah, it's a good way to end the video.
It is. So I need to remember the sponsor as well. Geordie Journos is sponsored very kindly by 4 Rivers Financial Planning for all of your bespoke investment or pension queries. Send it their way. We'll put it in the bio below. But fantastic to get their support. And I think we'll sign off.
Yeah, sign off for the season.
Does anyone want to say a thank you? Because obviously there's people, we're finding out this by day. The 4 corners of the world.
4 corners.
Comment
of the world.
today, Australia.
Yeah, Northwest Australia as well, which is like unique. Thank you so much for your comment. We've seen Corsica this week. There's been some incredible places. Let me know where you watch the Geordie Journos from. Let me know where you're
Because
tuning
worldwide as we'll get, because we're not
We're not
won't
going
be travelling for next season.
unless we
Other than
all
to
go.
Japan.
Unless we all go to Japan.
Yeah.
Let the viewers decide.
On that note, it's been an up and down season, and it's finally at an end, even without a ball kick today. And it still managed to kick when the balls. Yeah, didn't it? With the Geordie Journos. But anyway.
It's been a pleasure, lads.
It has.
If there's one highlight from this season, covering it we used to, Geordie Journos, and you going off on one when Newcastle get beat at wherever it was. Even when they beat Blackburn on penalties, it was like not being happy, but hey, it was all part of the ride, all fun.
We'll always remember those moments, and I hope you guys
sleeping
too.
on Milan Malpensa airport
floor.
It's been a good season
It's
in a lot of ways.
Good memories.
Yeah, good memories.
And you know what's come to pass? I don't want to be right, but it's been the unremarkable season full of remarkable results.
Did you call that in November?
You kind
blow
of.
smoke with your bum?
I think it was before November.
Before November.
Probably.
I think you called it not
After
long after
PSG.
Yeah.
Arsenal.
It just didn't
It was
feel.
Arsenal.
I'll be honest. My feeling throughout the season has always been that it's never felt quite like it did last season.
Yeah.
Even when they were doing well at the start, it wasn't the same team. It wasn't the same results. It wasn't the same feel. They went and scored more goals. Won nearly as many games and beat some remarkable teams along the way. But the unremarkable season full of remarkable results. We don't want any more of them.
Was it been a remarkable season full of unremarkable moments?
So if you flip it the other way around, I think PSG might argue. That's the one for the ages.
That will never be topped until Newcastle win a trophy.
Right. Like, comment, share, subscribe for all your Geordie Journos content. We'll see you again at some point this summer.